Hello and welcome to the podcast. I've got a brilliant guest lined up for today. Not only is he the host of the Estate Agency X podcast, he's also a TEDx speaker. He is an award-winning mental health wellbeing fundraiser. He's an estate agency coach and mentor. He's an author in sales and marketing. He's an ultra marathon runner. And apart from that, he's really quiet and got nothing else to do. Here's, of course, Mr. Rob Brady. Rob, thank you so much for coming on today, buddy.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
That
Absolute
is that is quite the CV and quite the introduction, to say the least. I feel
pleasure.
exhausted just reading it out. So well done, you, mate. You've got many plates spinning at one time, to say the least.
Yeah.
So talk us through, for those who haven't seen you online, listen to the podcast, for example, and see your TEDx talk. How have we kind of got to where we are today? What's the background of yourself?
Background is for about ten years, I was in an independent estate agency. I was always seen as the crazy one in that company, wanted to change things, rip things up. So in my early 20s, I became a sales and lettings director initially. As the industry happens, overnight, I was like, do you want to, we've left a load of management. We've got rid of a load of management. So you're the lettings manager. You've got no experience, but you can just do that job if you think you know what you're doing. So I was about 23 in that company. I then turned that from 300 to 750 property portfolio in 2.5 years. And then I wasn't seen as the crazy one then. So they were like, can you now do this for the rest of the company? So my mid-20s, I was a basic sales and lettings director. And in that journey, I went to the SDS Awards and actually met Mark, the CEO of Iceberg, and we were on his table. I just read his first book. It sounded a bit stalkerish because I was like, I bought 2 more books of yours as well. And we are going through this digital transformation. And this was in about 17, 18. I became an Iceberg client originally. And then the synergy of that evolution took place. And I started to see where Iceberg was going for, where the industry was going. And then I moved over to the other side of like the dark side and become a supplier in that space. The personal side to me, my TEDx, if anyone's listened to or watched it, in 2016, I sadly lost my friend to suicide. And in that journey, I actually combined with that hunt for that independent, trying to smash things, I just lost myself and I was considering parting ways of the world as well. So that 2006 was like an evolution of growth, and it sort of collided with meeting like Mark, and that then led me to the full growth journey myself, looking inwardly, mental well-being, running, raising, fundraising, all sorts of stuff. So it's been I'd say in the last 5 years, it's been a crazy period of let's go and find who Rob Brady is and let's see where my limits are.
And how did you find that transition from sort of being frontline lettings director and sort of dealing with the public and that sort of thing, to then taking a step over to sort of more the supplier back end?
Yeah.
How do you find that sort of thing?
Um, I tried to put myself back in the shoes of why I was doing what I was doing, because what I found, the reason why I moved over is because I'd had frustrations with transitions of softwares and dealing with suppliers and being sold this dream that never really came to fruition. So I always made sure that when I was speaking to clients, they really understood what they were getting themselves into and why we were doing what we were doing. At the time, this was pre-COVID, I was actually driving up the M25 and back over the Dartford Crossing. So it was a 5-6 hour round trip. So that was the commitment I had to speak to agents. I was going to the office, speaking to agents, and then coming home. And that was my daily role for like a year. So don't get me wrong, the transition, dealing with public, if any estate agent listening out thinking it's tough dealing with public, trying to deal with you guys, especially being a former estate agent, I don't mind saying it, it's even tougher because a lot of you guys are confused out there what you're trying to do and no direction, etc. And then you've got to deal with the public on top of that. So it's been an interesting transition, but I don't know, when you deal with a client who you've dealt with for now a few years now, I've been doing this now 5-6 years, come to my 6th year now, you spend a lot more time with those clients. You see the evolution of their growth, and you get to share the experiences they've gone through, whether that's the car they've always wanted, but equally the home that they've always aspired to, the holidays they always dreamed of taking their kids on, even down to the small moments of, I don't know, them going, spending time out of work and actually climbing a mountain with their child. You don't necessarily sometimes get that when you were dealing with a lettings or sales property, because although it's a little bit longer term, it's still short term than the grand schemes of dealing with a client for like 3 or 4 or 5 years.
So talk us through what your role is with regard to Iceberg Digital. What does sort of a day in the life look like these days?
Okay, so there's two parts to my role. The first part is I deal with the elite performance coaching for the transition of life cycle. So I have what we call a core performance program, and I look into 6 assets within the company. So performance, operations, sales, marketing. I have a thing called alignment, which is pretty much a general coaching session. And then we look at sales performance, marketing, operations as well. So what you find is, unlike most CRMs, traditional CRMs you get, where it just stores data, and then you've got internal workflows, and that's pretty much what it does. Obviously, Lifecycle is pretty much the world's first marketing and CRM combined. So a lot of the things I'm teaching clients is not only internal workflows efficiencies, like using AI and automations inside the platform, but actually getting them to understand their own identity and how it works and how they position that, how people go in through like a digital journey with them, how lead generation works, the types of lead generation they work. So as a coach, my role is to get them to unlock either their identity through authenticity, which I'm a big passionate part to it, how they work with their teams better, how they transition over to new ways of thinking and working, and also how they try and find the next layer of people that are looking to move rather than just dealing with the transaction now. So that's my first part. And then the second part is obviously we're under Estate and CX. We've got our podcast that we've been running since 2018. And within our Estate and CX, we've got an accelerated business accelerator program where we get world-class speakers to come in. It's a 12-month program where we work with agents in understanding how some things work outside the industry and how you can then adopt that into actually your internal company. So, for example, last month we had on one of our workshops, we had Marianne Page. She was a former trainer for McDonald's for 27 years. She left there 15 years ago and she now works with small businesses. So she had something like 15,000 managers and franchisees owners go through her training program in those 27 years at McDonald's. So she taught how 17-year-olds how to make burgers and turn up on work and do those flows. So she basically came to our workshop to teach agents and how they could take some of that methodology and some of those workflows and getting their teams to work in the same consistent way so the person feels the same, gets the same customer experience effectively. So 2 exciting roles with me, and then the well-being and stuff is outside of the industry. That's a big passion of mine.
So do you find that in a state agency it's quite how can I put this, inward facing with regard to the learning side of things? So I had Ian Macbeth on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and Ian talked a lot about sort of looking outside of the estate agency bubble to kind of look what the rest of the world is doing effectively, whether that's Google or tech or the car dealers or whatever it may be, kind of looking at and going, actually, we can sort of nick that into our world sort of thing. We can kind of improve from sort of looking outside. Do you think that a lot of people in the estate agency world sort of look in rather than looking out?
Yeah, and I think the hardest part is the transformation of what does that look like in their agency. I think that's the biggest struggle sometimes agency owners deal with. So it's all well and good seeing someone who talks on stage to how they've got a business that they're turning over £30 million. It's like, okay, that's great, but how do I put that into my team of 5 people in my one branch agency? I think that's where they struggle with the concept and transition. But I do believe, like, being a bit honest out there, we have the same stuff being said over and over and over again over the years. And the industry doesn't move forward. And then they wonder why all of a sudden this either new technology or a new player comes into the market. Now, like, wow, I didn't think, like, how did they come out? And it's like, because they've thought about things in a different way. If you even look at Purple Bricks, I know Purple Bricks have obviously had a rough ride in the last sort of few years, but when they initially came to the market, they were seen as a big disruptor and agents weren't prepared for it. And they were using a lot of technology at the time. And I think strategically, they didn't go down the right route. They tried to go global and they could have just focused on the UK market. But agents were all of a sudden like, oh my God, this has happened. What do I do now? Even COVID, we've got to work from home. Like, oh my God, how does this work? And it's like, people have been working from home for years. So you're right. We are very inwardly, and we do need to look outwardly to look at what is happening in the world in 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. What's the new technology coming through, and how is that going to disrupt us really? And you can't turn around and say it's just a people business and we'll survive, because there'll be efficiencies within that. So you'll find companies coming along who can operate on 10 people to an agency down the road who operate on 50 people using technology, still to deliver the same service, but actually they're more leaner business so they can expand and scale quicker. So yeah, definitely one to look at. I'd always recommend listening to podcasts outside the industry as well that are based around business technology. I used to love what was it called? Business Wars. It's a great podcast out there. I talked about like how Netflix versus Blockbusters and how that happened, and you start to understand actually how this can happen in our industry as well.
I love that. Love that a lot. So, talk me through, so obviously, from the iceberg digital point of view. I presume you're a big fan of a flow and a process, I'd imagine. But from the conversation we've had so
Yeah,
far, you're a big fan of this is the process of the business. Customer starts over here and finishes over here, sort of thing. I kind of get that vibe through and through. So, talk me through sort of some of the things that you would expect if you were a client of an estate agency using your software and CRM system. Talk me through sort of some of the processes and flows they kind of go through to kind of make the most out of them being a client.
good question. So yeah, we actually have royals of paper of our customer journey mapped out. We're obsessed about that part. So, and that's off the back of working with people like Marianne to develop Iceberg as well. So most things start with obviously that transition of software, and then we have an onboarding process, and then we have what we call the velocity program, where we actually have one of the things which we built out, which is my own internal frustration that we had, and speaking to a lot of agents, is when you transition from one CRM to another, you have like 2 days of training, and you're sort of left with it because training's like $2,000, and it's ridiculous for you couldn't have months and months because it'd just be so expensive. So we actually have a software trainer called Brad who we've developed out, and he has a velocity program, and he works with clients on a 5 to 6 week basis, getting them to understand how the system works. So if you deal only specifically with viewings and booking valuations, you can go on some of his in-person training sessions around that. If you deal with content, etc. And the first part is really just getting everything in place, getting your data transferred over, getting it working, the machine working to how you want it, the configuration on that. Then you then step into my coaching program, and my coaching program then lasts a minimum of 6 months, where we look at those 6 key assets. So clients would then sit down with me for an hour, and we work on a pretty much a big brainstorming session around why they took Lifecycle, what they're looking to do with it, and also some of their frustrations they might want to develop out. And then I then book those coaching sessions within them. So if they wanted to focus on brand, for example, and they wanted to look at their brand identity, then that session will be focused on how does their brand represent across their social media channels as well as internally. How does their newsletter look? What's their tone of voice? How does it present on a piece of content? So they work with me then for 6 months. And in that process, then they go through that transition stage. So really, when you look at joining us, you're not left with 2 days. You're with us pretty much 8 months minimum in that process of evolution. And then we've still got the community around us and events that people can come to, and we've got our own WhatsApp group that we can have. After that, then you can join my business accelerator program, because that's another deeper level of understanding how to transition your business and make it work easier for you. You're not in it day to day. And then we also have Neuron websites, which is our AI websites that are attached to the Lifecycle. You can't do a Neuron website unless you have Lifecycle. So the first thing is to develop our Lifecycle.
How important do you think it is for agents listening to this to have a sort of system and process into their business to kind of say, this is our client journey from start to finish, good bits, bad bits, etc. Because if I was a one-person band listening to this, I'd be like, Rob, I don't need a process because I've got it all in my head. I've been in the estate agent for the last 20 years. I've got it all in all the grey matter upstairs. Why need to write it down? Why do I need to have a process in place that people can follow when I just do what I do every day?
I think if you want to ever expand beyond your hands and actually bring people on board, your teams on board, unless you get that onto paper, unless you track that, then the next person's just going to be confused because they won't know everything in your head. And then you'll get frustrated with them about why they're not doing the same stuff as how you do it. And that will then be accentuated as you expand your teams, especially if you try and get to the point where you try and take yourself out of the business. You just leave chaos because it's all in here rather than on workflow. So, and it's also actually, when you think about it, you have to develop this sort more out. It's like what the client deserves. So we always talk about like an Airbnb experience. So if you think about from, say, book an evaluation, from the moment that person requests evaluation, phone call to physically stepping through the front door, like mapping out what does that experience look like? What emails do they get? Do they get something dropped off before? Do they get a knock on the door? Do they get a phone call? Do they get a WhatsApp? Do you do a video call? Like, what is the 10-star version of that instead of 9-star, 8-star, 7-star? Then all of a sudden you start to then look at the 5-star, and the 5-star could be really powerful that you've never really thought about beyond just what you do now. And then the second part to that is you can then measure the down points on it. So if something's happening within that journey that doesn't flow right, or there's friction, or something's not actually happening, then you go, oh, actually, at stage 5. So if it's yourself, you can then go, right, how do I change this? Or if you're amongst your teams, you can then go to your teams and say, look, guys, we agreed this customer journey together. Stage 5 isn't happening. So how can I support you as a leader to ensure that stage 5 happens? Or do we need to change it because our expectations was different to what we can realistically do right now?
And how often do you think agencies and with Iceberg Digital, how often do you look at these processes and go, can we make some improvements there? At the moment, it's a 50% conversion. Can we get that to 55% conversion, for example? How often should you look at that and take a step back and go, how well is everything working? Where should we be making my nips and tucks?
I think every time there's an error or an issue or a complaint or a problem or a slowdown, that's when you should be looking at it mainly. And it's not throwing at the book at who's done this wrong. It's a case of like, okay, and it segments in, it's the blame game, and it actually segments into like, how do we take ownership and accountability to what we're doing as a team, as a company to deliver this? So then whenever that process happens, you then review, where is it on this maps part that we need to change? And also when you get a lot of stress points. So you can't work yourselves as dogs into the ground. There needs to be a point where you need to give. When you look at any performance curve of team performance, you have that rise up, and then there's always that peak. And if you continue to try and go for that peak, you come off the other side. And that's when stress turns into anxiety. People start to get sick, and all of a sudden things start to break. So if you're in that point where you're, for example, so I don't know, you start to book more valuations in, and then you start to realise that the value is getting booked up and things are starting to slip. That's a moment when you start to go, right, let's review these processes. What needs to change in it? Do we need to add more people or add different technology or change the workflow within that? Or if the value is packed out. So for example, when I was back in agency, we always knew that between 100 and 125 for one of our property managers was the maximum limit that they could actually operate that portfolio to a satisfactory standard where all of our clients, all our tenants are happy. So when we got to about 80 on, we would then start to work on how do we recruit another person, and we start that evolution. So then all of a sudden they start to be trained up. Next person comes in, that flow happens, and then you're building up that person's portfolio. So it's, again, metrics as well, probably within that.
I love that. And I was kind of nodding my head along quite heavily with that because I had 2 instances last week where one, I had 2 clients who started working with ourselves who couldn't find the Zoom call link to first sort of do our initial sort of video call. And I said to the guys, can't be both of them. It must be, we must be hiding it. For us, it must be obvious that the Zoom call link is where it is, sort of thing, because we send it and we kind of confirm it, sort of thing. But to have 2 people in 1 week say we can't find the Zoom call link, that's something we need to change. Then the second thing happened last week is someone couldn't progress to our payment screen on one of the parts of our website, which obviously is quite a big deal as a business, as you might imagine. And I was like, well, it obviously isn't obvious enough. We've designed the website to be quite obvious and kind of this is where you go next. But clearly, if someone's getting it wrong and they're a sensible person and they're not stupid at all, so clearly there must be something wrong that we need to tweak and make improvements to. So I was nodding along furiously when you were saying that because I could literally think of those 2 instances last week where that's happened.
And also another part to it is you look at not just from customers, you use it from your own onboarding process. When a new member of staff starts, what does their journey look like entering you? Do they get a balloon on the first day? Do they get a card? What does their desk look like? What's their onboarding pack? How's their training? What do they do? Like, how long does that last for? When do you review their moments of delight afterwards? So is it a 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day plan that you have on board? Or do you just do 90 days? Let's see how you get on the review wise, and then wonder why in the last 90 days they haven't performed, and you're now just doing a review 90 days on, and it's all confusing. So again, think about, it doesn't have to be from a customer perspective, it could be internally. What does that look like when a new member of staff starts up with us, from the moment accepting the offer letter to then before even they join? What happens on the day they join? 30 days, 90 days, 60 days, whatever that might be in the future, 6 months, a year. So again, another thing you can think about if you are listening to, thinking, okay, how do we create that moment of delight for empowering our new members of staff joining us.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the first exercises I always do with new staff that join the team, means I go, right, you are a made up customer for the next day or so. Go through the website, look at the blogs, look at the site, click all the links, or think about as if you were a stranger to the business and go through the process. And we're going to, come back to me tomorrow and give me some
Yeah,
suggestions about what was good and what was bad because they've got no bias. They're just like they are literally a stranger to the business at that
yeah,
point. And they're like, oh, I found that bit really good and that video was really cool, sort of thing. But then that link, I couldn't find that. It took me 30 seconds to find it. You're like, right, thank you very much for that. And then they know the process that your clients go through when they first join the business as well. So when they talk to them, they know that the kind of lifespan as well.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
Love that. So obviously you deal with lots of agents at different sort of stages of their career. Obviously, some people come to you with a life cycle quite early on, and some people come to you sort of after they've been a bit more longer toothed in the game, should we say? What are some of the most common issues you think people face, regardless whether they are just starting out or been in the industry for a long time?
Good question. So we tend to deal with, so we've looked at what we call a predictable estate business journey, and you have like effectively startup, then you go into sort of hell in some aspects. It's growth, you're in growth, but you're trying to work through stuff, you're trying to get income in, and that whole year of like, I'm trying to sell houses, trying to progress them through, trying to work on my internal processes. It's all me on my own. And then you start to then get staff members, administration systems in place, cash flow starts to come through. Then we say most people then sit in what you call operational stage, it's that mid-range stage. And you could be operational from like year 2 all the way through to some agencies that are like 15, 20, 30 years old that are operational. And that's pretty much where cash flow comes in, it goes out. Yeah, peaks and troughs with market demands, but you still have a business in place, you have teams in place, and it's okay for most of it, but you're still a slave to the business. You're still having to work on it. You can't, spend more than 2 weeks out of your business before it going to crumble. And then most business owners then try and exceed beyond that. They're trying to go, right, I want to try and bring someone in. I want to bring in better workflows. I want to try and pull myself out of the business. And then there's another level of growth pain they go through to try and get to that excellent stage. Very rarely business owners do get to that excellent stage because they haven't set the foundations up, and then they pull themselves back to operational. Hence why we've got our accelerator program and like stuff like Ian was saying about understanding stuff that might be happening outside the business, outside in other businesses to try and support that element to it. So I'd say what we tend to find with a lot of our clients, they tend to come at just at that either point of operational or in operational, and they're thinking a bit like I was in 2017, 18, or even 16 as an estate agent going, right, how do we grow this better and bigger and larger than what we've tried to do each year when we do something but everyone else is doing it and we're just being caught up or in the same playing field as everyone else. So we have a lot of people operational, and I'd say the main parts is like those systems and processes not set up. With every change that goes through, like there's a lack of leadership in a lot of businesses owners, and that's not to discredit them. It's the fact that like most of them are being estate agents, setting up their business and just carried on going. And then when it comes to these moments of actually being a business owner, you almost have to take your estate agency hat off and work on how does this business operate. But you struggle to do that sometimes if you are out on valuations and dealing with all the staffing issues, and so it's very hard to have those transitions. So a lot of owners always say to them, it's like, okay, if you're going to start thinking about strategy on your business, you can't do that in your office. You have to do this at home, away from the office. You have non-negotiable time. You have to communicate with your teams about what you're doing, why you're doing it, not I'm just going to go and do this and not tell them. And then also with systems and processes, that is a very, very important one, because going back to those customer journeys and experiences, if you don't have any of that in place and you try and take a step out of it, you're just leaving a hole behind that is just chaos, and then the staff get stressed and you revert back. The amount of business owners I've spoken to have gone from operations to excellence and have had to revert back. I'd say 2 out of 10 have succeeded, 8 out of 10 have gone, I tried to grow it, all blew up, and then I'm just back into my safety zone.
Do you think that's because they underestimate the work needed to remove yourself from the business, and they kind of through a lack of planning for the last X amount of years, kind of it kind of all adds up. They just think to themselves, "Oh well, I grew it to so and so level. I'll get someone else on board. They'll be as good as me. They can just take over. I did it, so therefore they can do it. Therefore, they underestimate that sort of amount of collateral that needs to go into that sort of scaling stage."
Yeah, I think that underestimated time and financial resources, because what you'll find when you're in that, you have to invest your money back into it. So in your head, you feel like you're losing money by investing your money back into your business, but that is actually a stage of developing it. So whether that is bringing another person in to take the workload off you, if you want them to understand how you operate, then they can't just from day one just do that. That might be a mentoring process where you part all your knowledge of what you want your business to run with onto them, and that might be a minimum of 6 months before they even understand that from an operational side to it. So there'll be time for you taken out to do that, financial investment into finding the salaries to pay for those people or pay for new systems to be implemented. And unless you recognize that, you think it's all stress and you think it's all too much. But I always say, like, it's a bit like a rocket going out into space. You go for the atmosphere and everything's shaking, and then it goes out and it's all peace. So, like, sometimes you're in that rocket, you think it's in, but actually you are heading in the right direction. I just think if you don't understand some of those journeys, this is actually the journey I'm going on as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. I know this is going to be bad, but I know the next stage is going to be good. But I have to go through this tough point. A lot of them feel like the tough point is going to be forever, and then they just revert back, and then they get rid of the staff member. And also, I think it's the release of control as well. Huge amount of release of control. And you understand it. Your business is your baby. You set it up from day one. You're the first person to do this. And sometimes the fear factor of releasing some of the stuff you do, and that is the bit where if you don't do that, you stifle all innovation in your company as well. Because I've got owners that I've had to work with a lot with saying, look, give that member of staff the opportunity to do this. Let them do this, because unless you do that, you feel like you're stepping yourself away from the business, but you are still controlling all the strings, everything. And not only it's exhausting again, but you're actually never going to empower your team members to step up and take that role.
I'm frantically nodding along to absolutely everything you said here because this is the chapter I'm up my business at the moment. I've gone from a one-person band, which was me, to a four-person band very quickly,
Yeah,
and letting go of some of the control. So I had to let go of my social media about a week ago. God, that's like my baby. I've grown for the last 18 months or so, posting twice a day on YouTube, whatever it may be, to actually pass over to somebody else. I was like, oh, are you sure? I'll just do a little bit more. And then I had to no, I'll just let go of it, sort of thing. It's gone now, sort of thing. And exactly what you said with regard to the investment side of things, the outgoings of the business have quadrupled, very, very quickly, sort of overnight. And I'm looking at the business bank account thinking, there's an emotional point of view thinking, well, that's going to go down quite quickly. Oh my God, what is going on? There's a logical point of view thinking, that's going to go down quite quickly, but that's fine because it's an investment in the future, sort of thing.
yeah,
Either way, it's a blind panic.
yeah, 100%. And it's not just agency owners. I'm working with the CEO of a charity at the moment, and I was only with him over the weekend, and he does in-person workshops for all of his student volunteers that join. And last year he had like 78 join in the whole of the year, and then because of the successes that we've been working on, last month he actually had 80 volunteers join in 1 month from one university.
Wow.
So I was like, so if you have the next month another university, so how can you deliver these in-person workshops? Because there are four of them a month, and you're going to have to travel. So all of a sudden, you're going to get to the point you can't scale beyond the limits. So you then have to start working on can you deliver some of that in video format so they can browse some of the stuff, and then it might condense from 1 day to 2 hours. And he was actually, I was speaking to one of our trustees, and actually that was the things that we were discussing. So it happens in all walks of life, but again, it's just how do you create those efficiencies within your business. And a lot of the leadership comes back to how you transact with your team members and your ego states, and that sometimes is a bit more difficult to deal with because you have to really look at inwardly about who you are as an individual to actually grow and develop your business out. If you operate your business from a parent-like state, that's a controlling parent-like state, unless you work on that and understand how you can start to come to like a more adult like state, then you're just going to be telling people, and nothing will ever change. And I don't know, you just come as a repressive company to work for, or you're telling someone to lead, but they're just confused because they're like, I want to lead, but I know you're not, deep down, you're not allowing me to lead. And I know I'm waiting for that point where you're telling me either I've mucked up or you're going to take over from it, and then you disempower me.
Do you think it's a how can I phrase this? I don't say insecurity, it might be the wrong word here, but I'll go for that one. Is it an insecurity of people they run the business that they want to be the smartest, cleverest person in the room, so therefore they're like, guys, I am the peak of the pyramid. I started this business, I'm the absolute peak of it. Whereas other people look at it and go, actually, I've hired a social media person because they're better than me at social media. So therefore, there's no longer a pinch point on my knowledge base because I brought these people on board. They're fantastic at social media. Therefore, my social media is going to improve, and that is a good thing for the business. So I think there's kind of an insecurity there. People are letting go of that sort of control.
100%. I think if you switch we always use the analogy of like you are the captain of the ship. So your job as the business owner is to be on the deck, not to smash into the icebergs. I mean, obviously, where we work for Iceberg Digital, but if you're downstairs trying to shovel the coal in because you want to control how much coal shoveled in, or if you're on the back tweaking something, or you want to be on the front deck trying to do the experience of someone delivering some food on your thingy, and you're not controlling the ship, then all of a sudden you're going to wonder 2 months down the line why the ship's crashed. So you can't do all of it. And actually, the moment you release actually that, what is my skill set? I'm really good at this, and this, but actually, like I don't know social media, I don't know Google ads, I don't know Facebook ads, I don't know how technology works so much. But this other person is really good in my company, and they'll probably do that job better. I just need to give them the rules of the game. So that's where again, a lot of agencies don't necessarily have a branding guideline. So you try and give someone social media stuff, and then you get annoyed because they put stuff on social media. Like, that doesn't work with me. That hasn't worked. Why hasn't it worked? It's like, that's not their fault. That's your fault because you didn't give them the guidelines. You didn't give them the rules of the game. You haven't given them a branding guideline to say, don't do this, but do this. Our tone of voice is this. We use this type of artwork. I want you to post this sort of stuff every week. That's the rules for them. If you just say to them, you just take over social media and just do stuff, then it's just going to be chaos. And that comes back to those systems and processes and working on that. How does our business operate without me?
I've got an embarrassing confession to make here. My social media person messaged me on Friday saying, "What's our brand guidelines?" And I was like, "Blue."
Yes, exactly. And that is not just the blue. It's the what's our tone of voice?
Yeah.
What do we stand for? So, like one of our workshops we've got a branding expert, Mike Symes, brilliant. We've had him on our podcast, and he works in the financial sector. So if he can make insurance companies sexy. He knows his stuff. So, and he works with some businesses. Blase, he's gone like, oh, this business was only doing £3 million a year. We worked with them, and £3 million a year. I was working with them. And they started turning about £50 million a month.
Oh.
So, like 20x, whatever that is, 200x is whatever it is. And so he talks about it, and he talks about the essence of your brand. So, in our workshop we had with him, a lot of agents were saying, well, how are we different? Because we just selling net houses. And he was like, well, we'll go through this process and that come out the other end. So one of our clients at the end of it, they're very much a Welsh agent, heart of the brand, very warm, very friendly. There's a lot of sass with them as well and how they operate. And their core essence was bringing colour to the grey world of estate agency. And that was their impactful thing. So they could then work on that. They then built out their brand guidelines based on that. So what does that articulate into? The artwork that we use is colourful, it's not boring. Our videography is the same way, how we present our office, the teams that we recruit, what's our core values off the back of it, what's our wording. So all of a sudden it then starts to come through, and that gives you your differentiator compared to an agent literally down the road who just says, I sell in net houses.
I love that. Love that. So how, with all these changes to making the business and sort of, all these systems, these processes, there's always so many things to do. How important do you think accountability plays a role in that for the average sort of self-employed estate agent who might be listening to this?
A massive accountability. I think first one is everyone tries to, in my analogy, everyone tries to run a marathon before they can run 5K. And actually the most impactful thing is the first step. Because the first step will get you to the 5K, and those 5Ks will turn into larger runs, etc. So we always, I think, in a world of the less delayed gratification that we live within now, everything's instant. That a lot of agency owners, self-employed agency owners, try and strive to leap to greater, and that's not to crush anyone's dreams on there, but sometimes you either leap too big and then within 2 weeks you've lost it because you haven't realistically set this in place. So all of a sudden you go into burnout instantly, or you take such a planned leap that you never actually implement the first step because it just seems too big. So accountability is the micro habits, the micro disciplines you do on a daily and weekly basis. So the non-negotiable time, or we've got a guy that we work with and he's in our project peak performance thing, a guy called Chris Hunt. He calls it mission critical. So like each week, what are your mission criticals you've got to do every single week? And a lot of people brush over that too much. That they don't realise that if they spend an hour a week on social media content, that's 52 hours for the year. That's a phenomenal amount. But if they try to do the 52 hours in the first week and they never got around to it because it's such a big task, and then 4 months, 5 months down the line, there's nothing out there. So I feel like, I think accountability is massive, but it has to be tied with something. It has to be actionable steps. So what in your diary, what you're planning out. So even the CEO of that charity I was working with, I was only chatting over the weekend, and he said to me one of the biggest things he's worked on is non-negotiable time. So his non-negotiables are, he makes sure he's home for dinner with the children every night to have dinner. And he said, by just doing that, that's changed how I work inside. I'm a bit more smart with my time to make sure I have those efficiencies to then have that quality time with my children. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very much so, bro. And how do you stay personally so accountable? Because how many days are you up to for your cold water plunge in the morning?
643.
There you go. So how do you stay so accountable to that? Because I mean, that seems tough.
I was the most undisciplined person, and I hold my hands up to that. That was down to alcohol and drugs and not sleeping and binge drinking and eating and leading an unhealthy lifestyle, and everyone else was to blame for my problems. So the first one, when you look at accountability, the first one is actually having an internal conversation with yourself. So to be accountable, you have to hold your own power. The power is inside within you. Every time you blame somewhere else or you blame a situation, you're disempowering yourself to that situation. So they hold your power. So whether that is a struggling team member you're dealing with, and every night you're going home and thinking about them over and over again because they hold in your power. So because you haven't been accountable to take action to do something about it, or you might have a bad landlord who is causing crap for your team members, and you just haven't been accountable and taken the action to take the power back and say, actually, no, like, you're not a client for us. You've got to go. So the same thing happens internally with yourself. So taking back the power of eating healthier, eating cleaner, doing some exercise, going to gym, doing an ice bath, reading, having more time with your family and friends. So but it has to start again with that one small step. So if you look at 643 days of doing cold water therapy, a lot of people I get involved with, and first thing they ask me is, what's the temperature and how long have I got to do it for? And I was like, just do it 1 minute a day. Try that. Do a 15-second shower. Like, you came to Prop X. I started with a 15-second shower. That was cold. That was really cold. And I just carried on doing that until I got to the point where I was thinking, what's next? I'm getting used to this now. I take it to the next level. Whereas a lot of people go, right, I'm going to do a 10-minute cold bath thingy and I'm going to jump in there and that's going to be it. And then lo and behold, 2 weeks have gone by. They're not motivated anymore. Discipline's lapsed, and it's just a plastic tub in the garden collecting green water.
I did, in preparation for this podcast today, all seriousness, I did actually try a cold water shower at the weekend, and I went from hot to lukewarm, and I lukewarm for about 20 seconds to kind of like build myself up, and then freezing cold on the full cold temperature. And it was, I won't swear, but it was really cold. And
Yeah.
I think I managed 20 seconds of hyperventilating and full
Yeah.
tensing my body before I was like, that's enough, that's enough.
Yeah, but that, like, if you do that over and over again, you're getting yourself into an uncomfortable situation that will come comfortable. So if, like, when I met Wim Hof at the beginning of this year, and I went over to Amsterdam and did the ice bath plunge in there. What was really interesting within that, without going off too much off topic, we had a lot of people there for his breath work and they hadn't done cold water therapy. So they hadn't exposed themselves enough to build the resilience up. Whereas I had obviously done all the cold water therapy and the breath work, but lesser maybe on the breath work and others. So when I jumped into, that was a 10-minute, the last ever 10-minute ice plunge bath, and you're talking that thickness of ice. I was in there like just calm and relaxed. And that's not because of I could just do it instantly. That was because I had built up the resilience. So I built those 15 seconds, there's 1 day, there's 2 days, 2 minutes, 3 days, whatever that might be. And I built up all those years, pretty much almost coming up to what, a year or I was a bit, yeah, about a year and a half or roughly what I'd been going through. So if I'd gone in there from day one and thought I'm just going to do it, I probably would have never done it again, because I thought, oh my God, I'm never doing that again. But there was other people in that same space who were really struggling with it because it was the first time they'd ever exposed themselves to it.
So let's talk about sort of mental toughness and sort of moving into sort of the mental health side of things. So you're a big advocate for the mental well-being, mental health side of things, and I've obviously watched your talk on TEDx, and I listened to you talk at PropX as well. So I've got a very heartfelt question for you now. This is one of the big reasons I wanted to have a chat with you on the podcast. So after I did my talk at PropX, which is all about men's mental health, I was greeted off stage, should we say? It's probably the best way of putting it, by about 8 men in a row, all give me a hug, all a little bit teary sort of thing, saying, thanks for the talk and all that sort of bits and pieces. And they would come forward to me and say, I really resonated with what you're talking about. I had my brother who, took his own life, or my partner's going through this at the moment. And I literally just stood there and was like, I have no idea what to say. I've got people who are coming to me and opening up and saying, I've gone through this thing, I've gone through that thing, I'm currently going through this thing. And I was like, I am not prepared for this conversation. Like, what do you even say to somebody who comes to you and goes, "Oh, my brother took his own life. I really resonate with what he said to me today." Like, where do you even begin that conversation? Because I was just lost, and I literally said to them, "I don't know what to say to you."
I think that is the main part, really. Though there doesn't have to be answers to it. I think we live in a world where I do those no fine Fridays, which you comment on every Friday, and I'm grateful for that because it opens up better conversations and more deeper conversations. So I think sometimes just listening is the most powerful part. There doesn't have to be an answer to it because there's no real answer you could probably give to that person. I think if I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and you start to understand there's certain individuals who are working through it, and you would understand it just by listening and asking those questions. Like, how's that been for you? What's been your journey so far? Are you seeking therapy? Those sort of questions. If someone is really struggling who hasn't done that, or they've come up to you and then they really open up about it, that's when you start to then look at signposting. So one of the things that I've always worked on in a lot of my presentations, if you look at the mental health continuum model, there's 2 parts to that part, and it's basically rated on red, amber, yellow, or green. Red, amber, yellow, or green, and it's like a spectrum on how people are feeling. So I always had that on my phone if anyone ever come across and we got into that conversation, and I'd probably say to people, look, just to help me work out how I can support you better, where would you say you sit on today? Oh, I'm a red. Okay, right. What can we do to support you? So have you considered speaking to particular telephone lines, or speaking to a therapist, or who's the one person in your family network or your friends network that we could probably speak to today about making sure they understand what you're going through? If they are more yellows and ambers, then that just might be that someone might need that extra 5-minute conversation, 10-minute conversation, just to dump them what's going on about themselves, and they just want to be heard a little bit more. And sometimes that's just a little bit of a deload that some people need. I think if we all see ourselves as Coca-Cola bottles or fizzy bottles and constantly getting shaken up with different things that are going on in our lives, sometimes you can open it up and sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you can open up and it explodes. So we just need to work on how do we diffuse that person ourselves. So deep question. I got that a lot, especially when you open up, especially when you connected with the audience like you did, Chris, in such a powerful way. I feel you'll naturally find people coming up to you and saying, this is my experience. I just want to sympathise or understand that you're not alone in that. And at the same time, they're saying, I've been alone, and it's just trying to find other people who've experienced it as well.
Yeah, and I think that we're in a similar sort of role with regard to the advisory sort of world, and I semi joke with my clients when they first onboard myself and say, look, I'm 90% estate agent, coach, and 10% counselor sort of thing on the side, because a lot of it is let's do this and let's do that to grow the business and systems and processes and advice and fee increases and all this sort of stuff. But 10% of it is just kind of being there to say, oh, you've had a crap day, mate. Yeah, but keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right path. You're doing the right stuff, sort of thing, and kind of taking that edge off it. So I imagine you get a lot of that as well, just kind of by default of your role within the business.
100%. I think when you look at counselling concepts, there's a main sort of counselling concepts. You've got psychotherapy, person-centered counselling, and CBT. Most people would associate and be knowing of CBT because that tends to be what you call the plaster on the NHS. You need some CBT, you go for 5 or 6 weeks, and that will help you through understanding patterns, etc. If obviously you need a more deeper ingrained thing that you need to work on through childhood experiences, then that's when you go to sort of more psychotherapy. But in the middle, you have person-centered therapy, which is the goal of the person-centered therapy is the person that you are counselling is the expert of their own body. You're only there to try and encourage the growth or development of that individual and understanding where they need to go through asking questions. So this person-centered therapy is pretty much was the start of what coaching has come now, and business coaching has come now into the UK or worldwide. So the difference between that training and coaching is you're asking the questions to the individual because they are the expert of their business. You're not the expert of their business. You're just there to try and get them to understand what they want to do next and be that accountability partner that we spoke about, or that companion on it. So you're right, exactly what you're saying. Like, my biggest view is you have to sort out some of the most successful leadership that I've worked with have worked at their mental well-being first before their business grew, because that was the blockers within their business, whether how they transact with their teams, how they think about themselves. I've got a huge thing between synergy between either doing challenges as a leader, so whether that is running, cold showers, cycling, whatever sports, taking that level of growth will enable the growth within your business, because unless you do that yourself, how you expected your business to do in that same way if you don't even stress test your own self in that way.
I love that. Rob, you've been an absolutely amazing guest today, buddy. Thank you so much. I've got one final question, if that's okay. If there was one thing that you would say to someone who runs their own estate agency business at the moment that could give them a real kind of reward and quick turnaround and sort of advance their business going forward, what do you think that would be?
Who owns your power? It's the biggest thing for me. So just think about that from an aspect of it. You need to be empowered in your own self to take control of your life and your business. So look, from today, if you're listening to this, thinking, ask a question: do I hold all of my power? And that's not from you've got to be a control freak, but you've got to understand who holds my internal power, and that's in your relationships, internal, outside of work, clients, landlords. Does the business hold your power instead of yourself? Do you run your business? Do you allow the business to run you? So one of the questions I'll probably say, sit there half an hour away from everyone else and think about, okay, am I holding my own power? Am I holding my own accountability?
Rob, thank you so much for being an absolutely brilliant guest. I'll have you on in the future. We've got so much stuff we can talk about. You're absolutely brilliant, mates. Thank you so much.
Thank you.